Welcome, everyone. We are super excited to have you guys joining us for this Middleton Chamber June on track session. We are fortunate enough to have Andy Barron from Amplify Digital here. We're going to be going through affordable and effective digital marketing that drives ROI. So just a few housekeeping things you guys might have noticed as I started to talk is that closed captioning is coming up on the bottom. That is a service that we offer for those that need that. But if it is distracting and you prefer to turn it off, you can hide subtitles through your taskbar at the bottom. Other things, we would ask that you leave your microphone on mute just to kind of keep that background noise away. We always love cameras on just to see your beautiful faces and know that you guys are out there. We are recording the session today, and Andy's going to be great enough to share his slides with us. So after today, you will get an email from me with all of that information so that you can dive back into it, dive a little bit deeper, and then obviously Andy's contact information will be in there as well. I think, and then I want to give one shout out or a couple shout outs here to our sponsors today. We really appreciate the support of TDS, Amplify Digital, and Monona Bank. They are great partners to us at the Chamber and really help us make these programs possible. So with that, I would love to introduce our speaker for today. Andy is the digital marketing consultant with Amplify Digital. He's a highly accomplished business-to-business sales leader with over 20 years of experience working with Madison's SMBs to improve their digital presence and enhance their online influence. So Andy, I'd love to turn this over to you.
All right. Well, thank you for the introduction, Kristen, and the opportunity to present today. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really glad that you could join us for this discussion on digital marketing. As part of the Amplified Digital team, I'm certainly honored to present to you, and I appreciate you all taking time out of your very busy days. I know with summer starting here, school out, kids coming home, busy jobs, it's hard to get on these. So my plan is to be concise, to be valuable, and really hopefully leave you with some tools and some thoughts and strategies that you can really take back and start implementing today if you wanted to. So I really am looking forward to this discussion. And really the plan is to present over the next 30 to 40 minutes a framework for you to strategize your digital marketing and help make sense of all the channels and the digital products that can seem really overwhelming. In addition, I'm going to take a real deep dive, not a real deep dive, I shouldn't say that, but a deeper dive into two digital tactics that are great for reaching and influencing your target audience when they're really close to making a buying decision, and that's targeted email and paid search. So we'll go into a little bit more detail on those. As Kristen said, this deck will be coming to you, but as we go through the material, I do hope there is some time for dialogue. If you have a question, if you could use the chat function and enter that in, and then Kristen's going to kind of coordinate with me to answer those and let me know when you guys have a question. So let's begin and let's dive in. Take a little digital marketing 101 class here. And so I'll start with this slide. I wish I could say I built this slide, but someone way smarter than me actually came up with this brilliant way to help organize and develop a comprehensive digital marketing strategy. And what this framework does is it organizes your digital assets into three buckets. You've got paid media, owned media, and then earned media. And really by understanding how these categories overlap and interact, you can build a very comprehensive marketing strategy that will enhance your digital presence, but also allow you to increase your marketing efficiency, which is always important because we have limited budgets and we need to be really efficient with how that money is spent and how it's utilized. So let's take a closer look at what I mean by these buckets of media assets and take a little closer look at what each one of these are. So when we think of paid media, what we're talking about there is really traditional advertising. To simplify, paid media is really anything that isn't free to execute. Real life examples include banner ads on websites, sponsored ads that I'm sure you've seen on Facebook, pay-per-click advertising that we'll talk about a little bit. Really, more specifically, paid media it's almost always involving a third party, and the money it requires some sort of investment. You're basically buying the right to reach an audience developed and maintained by someone else on a platform that's not yours. And while it's pretty easy to manage paid media, um, it's also one that requires funding, and therefore it's one that is a huge problem, and that is it lacks longevity and staying power. So in other words, when you stop paying for paid media, its effectiveness will start to decrease. So we're going to talk a little bit about how can these other assets work together to create some of those efficiencies and perhaps lower the need to spend as much on paid media. So that leaves us to taking a look at owned media. And when you basically with owned media, when you hold the rights to an asset or a piece of content, it's considered owned media. So examples of owned media would certainly include your website. That's an obvious one. Your social channels, along with all your blogs, your video content. Think of owned media as a solid foundation on a well-built house. So, without this solid foundation, the other digital assets, they'll be less effective, and your ability to kind of leverage them and attract new customers is actually diminished. And a good example of that, and I see this a lot, is when you pay for Google Ads, paid search, and you send traffic to a poorly designed website, that owned media, the website. That's what you'll experience is that people will click on the ad from the Google ad and they'll go to the website, but they're just not able to engage. The website is maybe cumbersome, hard to navigate. It's not informative, and they end up bouncing and not converting. So that's just another example of how each of these three buckets play together and work together to be effective. When another example is if you have a referral, someone from your word of mouth network reach out to you on your social page, and people will go to your Facebook to do research on a company and its products. If they go to that Facebook page and it hasn't been updated since March of 2020, that's going to be a missed opportunity and an experience that is probably going to turn that person away from your business. Then what we come to is that third bucket, and that's earned media. And the easiest way to explain earned media is to refer to it as free publicity. Earned media is really the result of the public or the press voluntarily sharing your content and talking about your brand without prompting or payment. Customer reviews that people leave on your Google page or on your Facebook page. Those are examples of earned media. When people make mentions of you on their social, your word of mouth referrals, even your organic listings on a Google search result, how you show up on Google when people look up your business or type in keywords for your services, where you rank on Google is all earned media. You've done things to earn that position on Google, and it's really, really important. So the bottom line, earned media, it's something that's related to your brand. It's created for free by someone else and without the help of, using any sort of traditional media. It's sort of organically grown. The real important, I guess, takeaway from this model that I want you guys to think about is really three things. First, if you are looking at your digital assets, this is a good way for you to kind of organize those and assess what are your strengths and your opportunities with your current digital footprint. Maybe you are seeing that your website is a bit outdated and needs updating. Maybe your involvement and activity on social isn't where you really want it to be. A big opportunity might be our ratings and reviews, relative to our competitors, are not where they need to be, where we don't have as many as our competitors. I really want to put a focus on generating more reviews. All of these will pay dividends for you when you invest in them. And it's a good way to use this model and think about them and sort of assess where is it that you want to put some effort. The other part is really the efficiency that you can learn by thinking about this model and seeing that when you can improve the performance of either earned or owned media, you can really, again, have to rely less on paid media or you can make your paid media go further because you're doing things with your own media or you're doing things with your earned, and that can create some efficiencies for you. So any questions or anything coming through from you guys on this idea of how to organize your media assets? All right. Okay, another framework to help you build an effective digital strategy is something that is referred to as the buyer's journey. And maybe some of you have seen the buyer's journey. It's sometimes referred to as the marketing purchase funnel. Basically, the buyer's journey, it's a process that we all go through when we make a purchase decision. Typically, we become aware of a need or a pain point in our lives. Sometimes those needs and pain points arrive from a life event. Maybe we are newly married, we have a newborn, we're retiring. These are all things that can go on and kind of create these situations in our life where we become aware that I have a problem, I need to solve it. And so what we do is we begin kind of searching and researching to find possible solutions. And then we ultimately, choose a business to help us resolve that problem or fulfill that need. And so if the business treats us right, stays engaged with us after we make that purchase, brings us value after the sale, then we retain those accounts, and then hopefully, ideally, we can turn our customers into advocates and become super fans that are out there leaving us those glowing reviews on Facebook or on social platforms and on Google. So far that's a pretty simple concept. Nothing really big, earth-shattering there, but this gets a lot more complicated when you start factoring in today's technology and the ways that consumers engage and research with different media channels. And that's hence this sort of meandering path that goes through all these phases, and you can see all these different channels. But the other side of it is it also gets really exciting because from a marketer's perspective, and because of this technology, it actually allows us to deliver the right message to the right audience at the right time. And what that means is we can influence our targeted audience as they advance through each of these stages and ultimately move them towards becoming a customer and having customer loyalty. So I'll give you a real life example. In my life, in 2016, I lost my mind. I was going through a midlife crisis, and I decided to register for the Ironman triathlon in Madison. And this was in September of 2017. And the race day happened to be on my 50th birthday. So this mid-crisis was definitely unfolding. And so when I registered, I didn't have a clue about triathlons. I didn't have a good bike. I didn't have a wetsuit. But I did have a decent pair of shoes. And I had my secret weapon, which was my 21-year-old son who joined me for the event. And so in this process, I quickly learned and became aware that I definitely had a problem, and I had a lot of needs. I needed to train a lot, and I needed a lot of gear. So I began researching bikes and wetsuits and how to swim in open water and what nutrients to take, and that helps you with endurance. And as I researched these topics, I was exposed to a lot of brands that were eager to make me aware of their products. And as I was researching all these topics by reading, content online, visiting websites, reading blogs, I began to build a profile of myself on the web as someone who was definitely interested in triathlons. All of those activities that we do online are monitored, analyzed, gathered, and we can begin to build profiles of people. And that really helps us with targeting. And there was no doubt I was being targeted. It wasn't long before I started seeing ads following me around on my social sites and on my websites. And I'm sure all of you have experienced that yourselves. When you look up a product or service, all of a sudden, in some cases, you feel like you're talking about it. And through your mobile phone, it seems strange. And there's a lot of debate about this. But anyway, all of a sudden you start seeing ads appearing on your social pages and so on. And that was certainly what was going on with me as I was kind of going on this journey, learning about triathlons and purchasing all the gear And so as we were going along and I was purchasing products for me and for my 21-year-old son who had no money, so of course I was buying everything for him as well. We were getting, close to the point where we were getting into the training, and now we needed to start buying some of this gear. And I needed to find a local business where I could go and purchase all this stuff. And I started doing that by going online and doing Google searches and looking at websites and looking at Facebook pages of local businesses to see really, who was out there that I could trust, who was offering valuable services to me that I could use to learn more and more about triathlons and how to prepare for the Ironman. And I found in that journey an answer to all my problems, and that was the Endurance House in Greenway Station. And I went there and pretty much bought all the gear that I needed for me and my son, and it was a great experience. They definitely followed up with me, providing content and support that was both in the store and offline. And I just really became an advocate, and here I am talking about Endurance House today. So that's probably, just a good example of how we go through this journey from awareness all the way through purchase and retention. And again, that meandering path that we take in all the different touch points along the way. And the rest of the net of the story, we did finish 15 hours, so no records were broken that day, but we did finish. But it was a great bonding experience with my son. But without sounding too cheesy, it really did give me an appreciation for this buyer's journey and learning firsthand how successful businesses use all these multiple touch points and channels to influence their targeted audiences throughout that whole entire buying process. So when it's done right, you can certainly turn a new customer into a loyal customer. When we look at measuring the success of our digital campaigns, one of the great things about and one of its strengths of digital marketing is its ability to measure its performance. It's very difficult to measure the effectiveness of traditional media, but however, with digital media, it does allow us to measure critical metrics and each stage of that buying process. So you can see here, we've got, top of funnel brand awareness, middle of funnel consideration, and bottom of funnel conversion. And at each of those stages, there's very specific metrics that you want to set up for your campaign and measure against to ensure it's effective. So if we're going to focus on driving brand awareness, then you're going to want to be thinking about metrics like reach and frequency. You're going to want to think about impressions and expected impressions and click-through rates. How often are your videos being viewed? There's very specific measurements that you can set up to track this performance and really see are you getting a brand lift from your branding efforts? When you get into the middle of the funnel, this is where people are sort of looking at their options. They're certainly evaluating what your offerings are relative to your competitors. This is where you want to start looking at website traffic. You want to see their social engagements. You want to see how they're interacting with your own content. And you want to measure, obviously, clicks on the ads that you're promoting. This is there's a lot of tools that are at your disposal to measure these metrics. One of which is Google Analytics, and we could spend hours on Google Analytics. We won't be able to get into that today, but Google Analytics is certainly a place that you can go in and set up these conversions and measure the performance against the goals that you've set for your campaigns. When it comes to bottom of the funnel conversion activity, that's really where lead generation occurs. That's where those conversions happen. So you should definitely be looking at phone calls generated from your campaign, form fills that people are filling out, online purchases, and there's even ways to measure in-store traffic and tie it back to your digital campaigns. Does that make sense? All right. Well, let's move on to a deeper dive on email marketing. What I want to do is show you how this tactic is very successful at brand building and creating awareness. It's also effective to drive conversions or purchase when it includes the right promotional message and offer. One important thing to point out here in this discussion is that when I refer to targeted email, what I'm referring to here is using a third-party platform and its email database to deliver your message to a targeted audience. This is different than using your internal email database. Maybe some of you use services like Constant Contact. That's a real popular software package that you can use and reach your current customers and stay engaged. With targeted email, and what I'm referring to here is this allows you to reach new audiences. And these are audiences that have opted in to receive promotional messages in their inbox. So it's different than your internal email. And there's no doubt that targeted email is very cost effective. And you don't have to trust me. This was from eMarketer, which does a lot. They're kind of a lead data provider with regards to marketing trends and marketing digital usage. And in a survey of in-house marketers worldwide, looking at all these different tactics and asking them which provides the greatest return on your investment, you can see that email marketing is consistently at the top year after year in these surveys. And I think it goes to the fact that it's so targeted email, and I use it for a lot of my clients. What I find with targeted email is that one, it is affordable. It has a lower cost per thousand, but it's very targeted, and it's reaching an audience that is engaged in something, in an activity that's less cluttered, I'll say. If you're trying to put your ad up on a website and people are reading content, or maybe it's on social platforms and there's kind of scrolling through, looking at friends and family's posts, and you're trying to make your way into that audience's attention span, it can be tough. Sometimes people are playing Candy Crush and they're preoccupied with a game and ads are there they're not really paying attention to. Email, on the other hand, everybody, for the most part, over 80% check their emails on a daily basis. And with the right messaging, the right targeting, the right subject line, you can capture that person's attention more than most advertising vehicles that are out there. And again, when we use this a third party for targeted email, their database should include people who have opted in to receive emails. And so you're reaching a captive audience who's wanting to receive this promotional material. We talked about the targeting. The one thing that I have a client who's an exterior business. They do roofing and siding, gutters. And this is just an example of the targeting that we do for that business. We look at houses that were built 1950 to 2005. They've got a home value of $250,000. The homeowner has an income of $75,000 plus, and we isolate it to the geography of Dane County. And that geography that you use for targeted email, depending on the provider, I mean, it could get down to zip code levels, cities, counties, DMAs, statewide, nationwide. So the targeting is very extensive, but in this case, there's over 54,000 emails that we're able to send out to people who meet that criteria, and it really does a fabulous job for them. So we'll talk a little bit about the metrics and the trackability of email in a second and give you some metrics to look at, but it is very trackable as well. Mentioned this, it's cost effective. The other thing about email, it's interactive, it's versatile. It kind of can have a life after the initial send, because people will forward emails onto friends and family and people that they know are perhaps interested in what it was they received. You can take a targeted email that we would send out to a client, and you can also use it in your social posts. I've seen clients put the same email content on their websites. So it can be versatile. It can also include video. And of course, all the traffic that these emails, where a person gets the email in their inbox and they click on it, you send them to a landing page. And on that landing page, that's really the great opportunity to go more into the particular product or service you're promoting, or your promotional offer, and so on.
Andy, I have a question. I just want to make sure that I understand this. So when we're talking about communicating with existing clients, that's probably where we're using like a constant contact, and it's more like a communication tool. So news, promotions, specials, in our chamber's case, events that were happening. What you're talking about sounds more like client acquisition. Like, how do I get new clients and find them? Is that kind of what we're talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. And
I just wanted to make sure that I understood it.
yeah, no, that's a great question. There's no doubt this is targeted email in the case that I'm talking about here, where we use a third-party data source for the emails, is definitely going after new audiences, new customers. And when you kind of think about that buyer's journey that I mentioned earlier, and where does targeted email fit? It really does an ideal job here in this awareness stage. This is where you can target individuals and make them aware of your offering. In this particular case, it might be, we haven't had a lot of rain, but let's just say if we were getting a lot of rain and you wanted to get out to people that, going up on your ladder and cleaning your gutters and, is a real pain, and you should probably think about getting a different set of gutters that has a gutter, guard on it of some sort, so you don't have to get up on that ladder. It's just a great way to introduce people to ideas that maybe they didn't even know they were aware of, that they had an issue, and now you've pointed that out. Or maybe, like I said, they go through those life events, they're experiencing things now that they need, and you can really make them aware of your product by using targeted email. But the other thing is that targeted email could also play a role in that purchase and retention, or a purchase part, because that could be the promotional offer that you push out to somebody that really kind of tips them over the edge to decide to go with you versus a competitor. So it can play a dual role in branding awareness as well as new customer acquisition. Typically, the internal email that you mentioned, Kristen, that is used like with constant contact, that would fall kind of in this retention, where a lot of people will use constant contact to stay engaged with a client who's already done business, thank them for that, remind them of other opportunities for similar products and so on. So.
Hey, Andy, can I ask a quick follow-up question on that? Where would say a small business go to acquire sample, and how would they do this? Do they need to, engage a firm to assist with this, or is some of this kind of self-serve and easy to do, or what are your recommendations in that space?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are certainly going to be some self-service options out there. The typically for your internal emails, that's usually where you see that self-service. Again, constant contact comes to mind. But when you start looking at acquiring emails outside of your existing database, I would recommend using a trusted source. And we'll talk a little bit about that trusted source and some of the things to make sure that you look at when you're looking at a provider. Because the one thing that you can't do, or you shouldn't do anyway, is you shouldn't just randomly gather up a bunch of emails and send out emails randomly. If they're your current client, you kind of have a permission to send them information. But if you just wanted to gather up a bunch of emails from a list provider and just blast out a message, and those emails haven't been vetted to opt in to receive promotional messages in their inbox, you can get dinged, and by dinged, I mean be disallowed from sending emails, or possibly even face, a fine of some sort. So it's really important that you do find a good provider, and that you do it with someone who's reliable. So one of the questions that comes up is like, where do these emails, come from? How do you get these emails that are CAN spam compliant? And we'll talk a little bit about what that means. But it's very interesting how the email databases are built out. A lot of the information comes from people who fill out online surveys and sweepstakes, e-subscriptions and e-registrations. There's all sorts of network of websites that are permission based and third-party data sources that feed into this database. but it's important that your provider is making sure that these are actually opted in emails, and that they are making sure that they clean the data. There's, in our particular case, the email that we provide, we go through and cleanse that data every 30 days. So you want to get rid of outdated email addresses. You want to make sure there's no sort of bots traffic that can make its way into email databases and so on. And you definitely don't want to have emails that will look at or appear as spam. There's a couple do's and don'ts around the use of email marketing. For every do here, there's a don't. So I'll focus on the do's. Definitely, you want to segment your list. You don't want to just randomly send out emails to anybody. You should have a good idea of who your target audience is. Think about where they might be in that purchase decision-making process, and tailor your list to a specific list. Think about subject lines. There's a lot of information you can find online about using great subject lines in emails. A lot of do's and don'ts. Don't try to get too fancy or try to use a lot of exclamation points and big bold letters and emergency or urgent or fire sale kind of language, because that does tend to get thought of as spammy and can get caught in people's spam inboxes. So that's important, the subject line. Having a solid call to action. This is often a business will miss out on this. They talk about their products and they talk about their services, but they sort of forget that critical step of asking someone to take an action, whether that's complete a form fill, give us a call, making sure that they do something as a result of that email. And then, of course, you want your emails to be, mobile responsive. Any solid provider out there who does this would make sure that it is responsive, because mobile responsive because a lot of the emails are read on a mobile device. And then a couple metrics to look at if you're doing targeted email. One is the view or open rate. The other is the click rate. So a view or open rate, that's just simply the percentage of people who you sent an email out to that actually opened the email and read its content. So that's the open rate. That's pretty simple. The click rate, that's the rate at which someone opened that email and then they engaged with it enough to click on the email, and then that sent that user or that reader of that email to your website, to your particular landing page that you wanted them to come to on your website. So click rates average between 1.3 and 1.8. Your open rates are 10 to 15%. So if you're looking to kind of benchmark any sort of targeted email that you might be doing, those would be the good benchmarks to levels that you'd want to compare to. All right, moving on to paid search, and we'll go into this a little bit deeper, but paid search, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with paid search as far as experiencing how this works in your own lives. You go onto Google, maybe it's Bing, maybe it's Yahoo, any of the search engines, and you type in some keywords into the search engine search box, and you get results. And the results that you get back, in some cases, are a paid ad, and in other cases, it's listings under a map section. And then there's also organic listings, which are those free listings that are generated on a search result page. But this is focusing on here when we talk about paid search, and there's all sorts of different ways to call paid search. Some call it PPC, which stands for pay per click. It's also referred to as search engine marketing. Basically, what you're doing with paid search is you're buying your way onto page one of Google. Page one of Google is a coveted position to be in, because what you're doing is basically putting your message in front of people who are ready to buy. They have certainly gone to Google, they've typed in keywords. Usually those keywords have some sort of purchase intent behind them. Things like coffee shop near me, shoe store near me. Those are certainly keywords and indications that these people are looking to make a buying decision and a purchase. And so when you have paid search and you're investing in paid search, that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to get your way onto page one. And typically of Google, Google has about a 90% share of all the searches. So there are some clients who will allocate budget across Google and Yahoo and Bing, but for the most part, Google is the place to put your budget to get the biggest bang for your buck. So a couple things about paid search versus organic. When we think about search engine marketing, paid search, that's again paying to appear on search engine results. When people search for certain keywords, you pay the search engines to participate. As soon as Google approves your ads, they go up and you start generating traffic to your site. Those listings are usually designated with some sort of an ad indicator next to them, and notifying that these are ads. And the ranking isn't guaranteed, but if you have someone managing your campaign who does an effective job on bidding, who looks at things like your quality score, your keywords relevancy, there's a lot of factors that can go into making your search engine marketing and your paid search campaigns effective. You can typically occupy a solid position. It does take a budget, and that budget's going to vary based on the geography you want to reach, as well as the keywords that you want to use, because some keywords are very expensive. Legal and finance keywords are some of the highest, but there are other keywords that are less expensive, and that's really kind of the trick in the whole thing, is being as efficient as you can so you can generate the highest number of clicks for the lowest cost. When we look at search engine optimization, on the other hand, that kind of goes back to that earned media that I was mentioning earlier. This is what you've done on your website to make it very attractive to Google to want to serve up to its users your website information. That's Google's mission, is to give a great user experience to people who use its platform and serve up very relevant information. So if you've done a lot of work on your website, you've done a lot of blogs, you have video content, you're also updating your social. There's some play in with SEO that social can help you with. These are all things that can help you rank higher on the organic section of a Google search result. And if you want to invest in SEO, it takes it's a long-term play, 3 to 6 months before it can really start taking hold. So unlike paid search, where you can pay Google now and start showing up on Google tomorrow, search engine optimization and its benefits are going to take some time. So just be prepared that that's a longer term plan. And then some of the benefits of paid search I really hit on already. It's visibility. You're able to get up and running. It injects that traffic immediately. It's in front of high potential, high intent customers, and these are people who are definitely looking for your services. It drives leads. It can have a very high return on investment, and there's some great analytics behind paid search that you can use to measure the effectiveness of the campaign. And again, this would be another example where you would want to integrate your paid search campaign with your Google Analytics to really measure the effectiveness. So where does it fit in that buyer's journey? Without a doubt, paid search is definitely right here in this purchase area. There's definitely some arguments you could say that it does fall back here in awareness, but when people are starting to research and look at their options and look for companies and providers in the local area, because they're ready to buy, they've got one hand on their wallet and the other on the keyboard. This is where you want to be. You want to be at that purchase stage to make sure that you're being found and you're being chosen as the solution to their particular problem. So that's lead generation is definitely the name of the game when it comes to paid search. And then there's some do's and don'ts around paid search. Again, you want to make sure that if you're going to drive traffic from a paid search campaign, make sure you're sending it to a well-built website, or at least a really well-developed landing page that's designed to convert. That landing page should have a form fill on it that's very obvious for someone to fill out, a call to action encouraging them to fill that form or to give you a call. So that's critical. You want to have someone that is going to do the analysis on that keyword research, making sure you've got the right set of keywords that you're bidding on. You want to categorize your keywords around groups. So you don't want to just, typically if you have I'll have a client, for example, that does senior living, and they offer memory care, they offer assisted living, they offer independent living. And the way we structure that campaign is we actually use and set up keywords around each of those, what are called ad groups. And then we serve ads that are very unique and relevant to each of those ad groups. And that's how an effective paid search campaign should be structured. And then you want to look at your conversion tracking, of course, to measure its effectiveness. And if you are looking for a provider, someone who's offering you search services, the first thing I always want to make sure is, are they being transparent with you? Are they willing to share with you their management fees? There's no doubt that managing a paid search campaign is, it takes a lot of effort. It takes the combination of software and the human touch. And you will find that just about anybody who's offering search is going to have some sort of management fee. You should ask them what that management fee is, so you know how much your budget's going towards that versus towards the actual media spend on Google, for example. You want to make sure that they're doing optimizations. You should be looking at Google throughout your campaign in making sure that optimizations are happening and that they're giving you status updates. Every 30 days is really what I do with my clients. So there's ways to look at results for paid search. There's some click-through rates and average cost per clicks. WordStream, you'll see it in the footer here, is a great resource to look to for some of the industry benchmarks for your click-through rates and your cost per clicks for search. And so anyway, it was a lot of content, and I know I was going on. I hope the idea here with this takeaway is not to read all of this to you, but when you receive this deck, that you do have a couple things to just kind of summarize all those things that we talked about. But I really would encourage to look at some of those frameworks that I gave you on the front end. Take a look at organizing your assets. See whether you've got opportunities amongst those, the owned, the earned, and the paid for media. See maybe where you're vulnerable, where you could strengthen that. I would really think about your target audience and understand that journey they go on and the different media that they engage with, and making sure that you're not just sort of putting all your eggs into one basket. You're not just doing Google paid ads, but you're really thinking about that journey and how you can build relationships, trust, and get your brand and awareness in front of people early on, so that as they move down that purchase funnel, you can convert them into a customer and not just rely on one tactic. And then, targeted email, great way to go outside your current customers and find new audiences who are engaged and have agreed and opted in to receive that information. And then, of course, the paid search that we just talked about, great way to reach people at that point of purchase when they're ready to make a buying decision. So with that, I really appreciate your attendance here and your participation. I hope I answered some questions and gave you some things to think about that you can take back to your business and start thinking about implementing today.
Perfect. Thank you, Andy. Let's go to that. If you can go to the last slide, I want to wrap up. I know we're kind of at the time that we told you guys we would be done. So in interest of time, I'm going to do that. But then we do have some questions. I'd love for you guys to stick around if you want to talk to Andy about a couple other things. So again, thank you to Andy. Thank you to all of you guys for attending. We really appreciate you sticking through these virtual events with us. We are headed back to in-person. We're in the process of working that out. Our first in-person event, I'm going to jump around on this slide, is actually going to be our business social hour on June 24th at X Golf. So we're really excited about that. The other ones listed here are going to stay virtual. So we are doing our networking blitz. That's our one-on-one networking next week, Tuesday. Next week, Wednesday, we're going to talk with the Wisconsin Tourism Department about how do we bring our economy and the tourism department back for the state, and what does that look like for the rest of the year and even next year. And then also going to be talking about some leadership skills and developing leaders within your organization on the 22nd. So again, thank you to TDS, Amplify Digital, Monona Bank. We appreciate you guys being here. I know if you need to duck off, please feel free. Otherwise, I am going to go back to a question that we got. Andy, if you've got a few more minutes for us.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the comment and question reads, excellent presentation. Thank you, Andy. With regards to the targeted emails, what is the level of service you provide? Is the content design and email sourced by you, and how much work is on the client's end?
Yeah, great question. So when, and this is speaking from Amplify Digital, but this might, I would imagine there's other providers who would be offering a similar service, but in the case of Amplified, we would build the targeted email for you. And that email is built in HTML, which is just a language that allows it to interact with the web. And it gives you all that click functionality. So when someone opens up the email and they click on certain links, they're going to go right to your landing page from that email. And that's something that you want to make sure is how your emails are built. So we provide that service. And then the other service is the actual procurement of those emails. We're going to go in and based on your needs and goals and who your audience is that you're targeting, we're going to gather that list together. And we're going to put together a list that is going to reach the geography that you want to reach and the budget that you're willing to spend, and then reach that target audience. So all of that, it's actually a pretty easy process. We ask for the client to give us some creative, so we can include any assets there, and of course any specifics around messaging and what it is that you want to communicate.
Andy, hey, that was actually one of my questions. So, and follow up one for you with regards to the landing page. Is that something that obviously it's different to the homepage, right? Like, so if it's from my website, I would create a specific landing page that I would use as the connection from the email to that, and then from that, move them on to my website in whatever direction I would think would be appropriate.
Yeah, actually, James, there's you could do it a couple of ways. You can send it directly to a page on your website. So
Okay.
if you've got a pretty decent website that with specific pages relevant to a specific content category or topic, and there's a place for someone to take an action, like fill out a form or make a contact with you, you could send right from that email directly to that specific page on your website.
Okay.
You could on the another option would be to build a unique landing page that's really relevant to that email's topic, and have it have its own form fill, and and that's another way to go. And quite honestly, an effective landing page coupled with the actual digital tactic like email works really well. I mean, that's the ideal. There's a lot of small businesses just don't have that resource to build each landing page for each tactic, if you will.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that takes care of our questions in chat. If anyone would like to take themselves off of mute and ask a question, please feel free to do so. All right, well then I will say goodbye. Thank you again, you guys, for being here. We appreciate Andy, you taking time and sharing these awesome things. I think one of the slides that I love the most was the SEO versus SEM, and like trying to remember in my brain like how those are different. That I thought was great. And also thank you for providing like what we should look for in a provider. I thought that was really useful as well. So until next time, we'll hopefully see you one of these events on the screen. Again, we can stay on for a few more minutes if anyone else has additional questions. Thanks for coming.